I've been saying this for 2 years. I've been saying for 2 years that product is getting hard to get, that getting clients is easier than getting product. It never was that way. And this market will ultimately define itself by an inability to source product. I've been saying that because I see this event mathematically and economically and logically ultimately coming. And I get a lot of heat for it. Yeah, you're talking your book. No, I'm not. I'm seeing what's coming. And if this is what it's like when there's not even 1% of the public has assets in metals, what happens if it gets to 5%, a lowly 5%, which would represent a tenfold increase in demand in the United States? And much like the open interest on COMEX right now being 1,750% greater than the registered bars in the vault, that's what's going to happen. The word rehypothecation, the word where you think you're going to have access to gold, you're not, and silver. And I think it's only going to get worse as people wake up to what's coming. When I talk to people about using gold and silver as a vehicle to protect oneself, it's not an investment, it's wealth. It's wealth that's lived through 2 world wars and German hyperinflation and the Great Depression and every pandemic, and is still immutable wealth. And while we are in a very scary boat of uncharted waters surrounding us, I still think the safest place to be is the life raft that is a 5,000-year-old gold and silver life raft, and look at it as wealth. And if you own enough of it, you'll be wealthy. Might even allow you not just to survive, but to thrive in what is coming. But certainly I don't sell it and don't advise anyone buy it to get wealthy. This is why they imposed bail-in legislation in the United States. This is why they imposed money market gating legislation in the United States. This is why the biggest money in the world has been suppressing metals and draining the exchanges. This is why we've seen record insider selling on strength in the equity markets. I mean, if you put it all together, in and of themselves, these little pieces don't amount to as much, but put them together, and I owe you, and you alone, the biggest debt of gratitude because of your education on Basel III, on gold's reclassification, and just how serious that really is, because the biggest money in the world for the last several years has been quietly accumulating gold and doing it using price suppression as cover. To your point, give it to me until you can't get it anymore. When we only have 38 million ounces backing the entire price setting mechanism of the world, it's happening. And this is the point. They are quietly exiting stage left until the spigot is turned off and they say no more outflows. Well, at that point, the market is exposed for exactly what it is, a fraud. So I think you're seeing the biggest money in the world front run that type of a moment, which, much like the cryptocurrency companies that went belly up because they were rehypothecated, you could very easily see that. Now, I don't think the COMEX will blow up because the banks will protect themselves just like they did by changing the rules against the Hunt brothers. But I think what you will see may be something similar to what you saw in the LME with the nickel market failure, which I think delegitimized the LME to a great extent. And maybe this is why you're seeing the commercial banks pare down their short positions after that spiritual or religious moment, rather. And maybe this is why you're seeing so much drawdown ever since that March event. You're going to see the markets in the West, I think, be delegitimized as the benchmarks or the platforms for setting the commodity prices, when the rest of the world, which comprises 80+% of human population, so all of these countries that are moving away from the Western system, that are joining the BRICS nations, that are on the Belt Road Initiative, a new currency that's going to be pegged to commodities. Do you think there's any coincidence that they're buying the only other Tier 1 reserve asset? Do you think there's any coincidence that they're very quietly accumulating gold and pulling it off of the exchanges and silver, 38 million ounces to India last month or the month of August? Is there any coincidence that this is all happening now? And I think the answer is no. And this is why people who are bummed out about price need to take a step back and realize this is one big game. This is a global shift. The West has controlled the game for centuries, and I think the rest of the world, in and of themselves, even 10 years ago, couldn't stand up to the West. But now they're all joining together, and I think they all have economies put together that dwarf the West. They have military presence that put together, they dwarf the West. And they're building relationships based upon mutual trust and cooperation. They're building a relationships against the Western hegemony. That gets them to the table, right? But what is the glue that is going to solidify is the commodities they're all massively accumulating that is going to peg a new system. There's no coincidence that I think that China is front and center in saying we're going to issue a new world reserve currency on behalf of the BRICS. What better way to roll out distributed ledger technology to the world by now having all of these countries that are part of this new group pegging commodities to a distributed ledger technology. It won't be open source, it'll be permission based, but you will be able to see, and it won't be convertible, because de Gaulle from France proved that convertible currencies convert, but it will be pegged. And they will say the distributed ledger technology shows the immutability and the veracity of all of the commodities. Saudi Arabia just pegged oil. China pegged gold. Russia pegged fertilizer. I mean, whatever you want to say, whatever these countries are going to peg to the currency, it'll be shown with veracity and immutability on a distributed ledger, and it will very, very, very quickly disrupt things globally. These moves are not coincidental. What they are is a lot of the big players who know the script are clued into what's coming, and they are using price suppression to position themselves and to pull all of the metal off the exchanges and to get out of dollars and dollar-based investments. The physical market is incredibly liquid. I mean, I would love it if someone called and said, I have $10 million worth of silver bars to sell you. I'd pay them as fast as they could blink. And I think that's an environment where product is literally disappearing as fast as anything I've ever seen. And Saudi Arabia just came out while in a meeting in South Africa and said, we are going to join the BRICS. South African president and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia both acknowledge this. When you see these are the countries that produce all of the world's commodities, they produce them, they import them, they are money to them. When you see the fact that you have a Moscow exchange who realizes all of this, or the talk of a Moscow exchange, which would appeal to all of these countries where they can set the price for gold at a realistic price, call it $3,000, set silver at $50, $75, $100, and bang, like that, all of the Western markets would arbitrage directly to the east to capitalize on that, and you set a real price. You will break the COMEX, you will break the London Metals Exchange. Maybe this is becoming obvious, but what I will say is that I do believe that the Western dominance is going to be challenged by the BRICS nations, who have just come out and said we are going to issue a world reserve currency to challenge the dollar. It will be pegged to currency or to currencies and commodities.